Hey everybody, it's Mike Sullivan with Born to Shine. Today we have an awesome guest. Her name is Dr. Lori Gonzalez. She is the superintendent over in Bakersfield, California at Lamont Elementary School District. And Lori, thanks so much for making time for us today.
Well, thank you. Thank you for the invitation, Mike. I really appreciate the opportunity to just share my story. And that's actually one of my platforms is to share your story because people need to hear more about yourself. And so thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you. And what was your journey like, Lori, to become the superintendent?
Yeah, it's interesting because research shows that women typically wait until they have 100% of the qualifications that are required on an application before they even apply, where, their male counterparts don't necessarily do that because it's
Mhm.
just that innate feeling of not being ready, maybe,
Mm.
or making sure that we have all our little ducks in a row. And so with that said, I have a pretty extensive background because I wanted to make sure that I was well-rounded before I made that step. And then I also had my personal, reasons. And so I'll start with my professional. I actually started as a kindergarten teacher. And so I was 3 years in kindergarten, and that was probably the hardest job I've ever done in my entire life, second to being superintendent principal. But that was really hard because, you go in and you're a fresh new teacher and you don't know, much about anything, even though that you've just done a year's worth of study. You go in with 5 year olds and you're like, wait, what? I was supposed to teach you. And so I did 3 years of that. And then I moved over to third grade because I started my master's degree. And so I wanted to make sure that I could utilize what I was learning in my master's degree at a higher level. And so I taught third grade for about 6 years, 6+ years. And then I got my master's in a reading specialist credential. And so my master's is in reading language arts. And then I was fortunate enough to move over into what they now call like a TOSA, teacher on special assignment.
Mm.
And so in that, for 3 years, I got to teach reading as an intervention for kids from kindergarten all the way to eighth grade. Unfortunately, it was a categorically funded position, and so the funds ran out. And I moved over at that point, was going to be moved over to the middle school as an English language arts teacher. And when I interviewed with a gentleman who then was the principal. And, during the interview, he says, have you ever thought of going into leadership? And that was like my first tap on the shoulder. And I honestly said no, because I had never thought about moving into that position. And at that point, I had had one son when I was working on my master's, and I saw how hard it was for me to be a mom and in school and teach. So I had promised to not go back to school. And so it made it kind of an easy decision that this is where I'll be for a while. Um, and I ended up having two more children, and so really got like put to the side. But I was got kind of got the itch, I guess, when he tapped me on the shoulder. And so then I applied for a position in Fresno County, where I started all of my career. And I became fourth man on the totem pole, so to speak. Well, I was a program manager at a
Mm.
middle school. And it was a big enough middle school that there was a lot to do. And so I did all of the categorical work, all the curriculum instruction work, and then really fell in love with leadership. And I was fortunate that I actually challenged the test. I challenged the administrative test, and I got my administrative credential, without having to go back to school.
Mm.
Then got into a VP position and then a principal position at a middle school. And then I was promoted then to a director of educational services. And then I was promoted to associate soup. And I did that for, gosh, 6+ years as well, maybe even more than that. Really got to know all of that area. So the inception of the LCAP for California, for those that know the LCAP, all curriculum instruction K-12. And I did a lot of work with the migrant department, the special ed department, the preschool department. So anything under curriculum instruction was really my jam. And I did all of that work and really loved it, and got to work with a lot of human resource, but more on training and professional development and all of that. A lot of work on just getting the mission and vision and the framework and strategic plan out, for the district. Then I became some things took place and I became interim superintendent. And I did that for 6 months there. Applied for the position, did not get it, but I knew that I was ready at that point. And so at that point, I actually applied for another superintendent position and got it. And one of the reasons why I felt that I didn't get the previous position was because I didn't have the construction facilities, MOT, and all of these expected kind of experiences. So I went off and I took a very purposeful position of um, um, superintendent principal because I was going to do everything under the sun. And
Mm.
so knowing that I would be doing everything under the sun, I knew I would have every experience, and I did, except for driving a bus. And that is my second most difficult job I've ever done. When you're superintendent principal, you literally do everything. And so you're the superintendent, but you're also the principal. So you're having to go out there and do recess duty or recess supervision, right? And then
Mhm.
still having to write the LCAP and then still having to, work with families and provide professional development. And now I really got to know MOT and maintenance operations and transportation and cafeteria food service and HR. And so it really made me the well-rounded quote unquote, candidate. Then I was ready. And so I did that for 3 years and I applied here in Lamont. And so here I am. This is now year 3 in Lamont, finishing it up. And it's been an amazing experience where, I have about 2,900 students, 4 schools, have had so much experience within construction and facilities and maintenance and operations and transportation now, but just as well in curriculum and instruction and in my
Mhm.
strategic planning and working with my leadership staff. And so it has been an amazing 3 years, and it's I'm very, very blessed to be here. And I would say that in between all of that, I did get my doctorate degree at USC. It was not something I had planned on doing, but I was ready for that next step, and my children had grown, and I had
Mm.
promised not to go back to school when they were still in school. And when my daughter graduated from UC San Diego, she's like, okay, mom, no more excuses. And so no more excuses. And so I am officially Dr. Gonzalez, and I'm very, very proud of that journey. And meanwhile, I'm still a wife, I'm a mother, I'm a daughter, I'm a sister, I'm a friend. And so there's a lot that goes on in my life that keeps me busy, but it truly enjoy what I do.
Yeah, it shows. That's amazing. And I love how you had so much encouragement, and even your daughter just saying, "Okay, mom, yeah, it's time," and going to
Yeah,
get that's so cool. And
yeah.
when you were K-12, was there anything that you may have struggled with, and maybe some anxiety or depression or something? Everybody has something.
Yeah, that's interesting that you asked that. I have been doing a lot of reflection as you get older,
Mm,
life starts changing for you and
yeah.
you start looking at things. And sometimes I honestly just look at myself and I ask, like, how did you get here? Like, how? Because I'm not your typical superintendent by any, stretch of the, means. I don't fit that, that square or whatever you want to call it. There are typically between 2 to 3% of Latina superintendents in the nation. That is, that is a statistic that's actually part of my dissertation. We believe that it's gone up a little bit, but when I wrote on it, it was about 2%.
Mm,
And it's hard and it's not easy being a superintendent, and people don't understand how much you give to be a superintendent. But just like not being given that first opportunity when I applied, it was because I didn't know those skills or because they didn't believe that I can have those skills or learn those skills. And that's
mm.
why, I sought them out. I wanted to know what it meant to really be deep into MOT and construction and facilities. And there's a lot to learn, right? But at the end of the day, it's all the same. It's like you don't know how to tie your shoe, you have to learn. You have to give yourself the experience, and if you give yourself that opportunity to learn and you dig in, you're going to learn to do it. And it's all going to look different because everyone has their own tenacity in their own way. But I would say that if I really look at myself personally, I need to find the right word because I
Yeah, back
don't.
K-12 too when you were a kid. When
Yeah,
you're elementary, because now you're the soup at an
yeah.
elementary school district. So maybe anything K-5 that,
Oh,
anything you struggled?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, K-12, I would go to K-22.
Okay.
Yeah, I would even
Yeah,
do
no,
that
same here,
because
same.
yeah, the reality is it was a self-imposed fear.
Mm,
And I don't know what to call it. Like I need a new term. And I feel like that there are so many times when we hear people say, um, you know, I didn't do this because I didn't have the means, or maybe, someone didn't allow me to do it, or there was a no, there was lack of access. But
mm,
in my case, even if it was accessible,
mm.
or if no one stopped me, I stopped myself.
Fear of failure,
And there
probably.
was
Yeah, that's
it
common. Fear
was
of failure for
exactly what
sure.
it was.
People
It
won't
was
even
just,
do it until, and that kind of makes sense because even in the beginning, you were saying you wanted to have all your ducks in a row and everything. And sometimes men are like, "All right, you want to hire me? Okay, let's do it."
yeah,
And do you have your paycheck? Nope, but
yeah,
I'm ready. And so,
yeah,
so maybe fear of failure, and sometimes I have that too. I think we all can share in that struggle sometimes. But that makes sense. That makes
yeah,
sense.
yeah. It
Was there
is
someone
absolutely
that
fear
kind of?
of failure.
Oh
Yeah.
no, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I would say it's absolutely fear of failure. Absolutely fear of failure, but it's also I call it my self-imposed limitations.
Mm,
Because I was brought up very, I'm in a Hispanic home, you have to follow all the rules, and I'm the first female, so
mm,
follow all the rules, everything, there was this thing that, you couldn't do it because what would they say? There was that
right,
what would they say
right.
mentality. And so I always limited myself.
Mm,
And then I was afraid of doing things, and that included even in school. Like I
mm,
wouldn't, um, if friends would invite me to do certain things, I'm like, oh, I don't know if I can do that. I don't know if my parents will let me. So
mm,
I would create excuses not to do it.
mm,
And then I would ask my mom later. She's like, I would have let you go. I'm like, oh, and so it was too late. Then you move into college, and I did the same thing. Like, oh, you can't do that. You're this or you're that.
mm,
So really self-imposed limitations and fears that I sort of put onto myself. And then that extended even into my career, right?
mhm,
Like
mhm,
I remember distinctly not asking permission to do things in high school,
mhm,
because I knew my parents would not allow me,
mhm,
to do it. Going to college, my dad was like, no, you cannot leave. You don't do that. We don't do that. We don't leave to go to college. And so I stayed, and did not go to a 4 year. I started at a 2 year. So,
mhm.
yeah, so that fear of failure was huge, for me. And I still have inklings of it. I was very quiet young lady. You wouldn't think it maybe now, but I was very, very quiet, very shy, very introverted. And that also contributed to it. Now I'm just like, all right, let's go. Here I am, I'm doing a podcast, right?
Great. No, I love it. It's awesome.
Yeah. But it's because I finally kind of got over it. Um, when I became when I became the program manager, I remember them saying, okay, well, you have to go speak in front of like all these hundreds of people. And I'm like, oh
Hmm.
my gosh, like, what are you doing?
Mm,
And you just sort of, and I just do it. And so I've learned to do that. But there are still times when I become that little girl from the past.
sure.
Yeah.
We all do.
If you put
I
me in a room with a bunch of new people, I'm gonna be the one that takes, oh, I don't want to, yeah,
and
that's
thank you for just being so honest, for being so genuine and authentic. I mean, the world needs more of that, and you just did it. So that was really beautiful. Thank you, Lori. And so if
oh,
you're watching, and if you're a student, or if you're a parent, or if you're a superintendent, or a teacher, a counselor, anything, if you're walking and talking and breathing, it's okay to not feel okay. It's okay. And I think what was so beautiful, Lori, is that you're saying, um, these things that were terrifying you, little by little, you started stepping into them. And even though you were afraid, you started to gently, little by little, face that fear, and it probably got easier. And then sometimes we get a little setback, and then it gets easier. And the more we do it, the more comfortable we get. And you've grown a ton. So it's amazing how God takes our let's say our pain and turns it into our purpose, right? Takes our mess, makes it our message. And so you're the
mm.
perfect person to be the superintendent. I mean, truly,
Oh,
because then the students, I mean, hearing this are probably going to think, wow, I feel like Dr. Gonzalez too. And she got through it. Maybe I just need to try little steps, a little bit at a time. So that was, thank you for
Oh,
just being so
well, thank
authentic.
you.
Yeah.
And that is neat when I do visit schools and speak to young ladies or I've
Hmm.
presented in front of, different like keynotes, with high school girls. They'll ask me like, or I'll tell them about my upbringing.
Right.
And when they hear like, wait a minute, my mom is like that, or my dad does that, and
Bingo.
I don't get to go here, or, I don't get to do that. I didn't have those typical experiences. And they're like, but look where you're at now. I'm like, yeah, guess
Exactly.
what?
Exactly.
Um, it
And
can happen.
yeah,
Mhm.
and what's so beautiful too is like, so for let's just dream together, right? What would you, now that you're the superintendent, 3 years, right? And you've had tons of years in the educational system, so you're doing it. You're a rock star now. So
No.
what would
Mhm.
you love to see more of to support your students with their emotional and mental well-being? Maybe if they're afraid of failure or they're stressed with test anxiety or just general anxiety, or if they're just really struggling, maybe some depression. What are
Yeah.
some things you'd love to see more of, in addition to the school psychologists and the counselors and what every school has? Is there just
Mhm.
something that you were, what would be like a dream in a perfect world to just have more of for the school year for your kids?
Yeah. Well, and that's such a great question. And there's like it's multifaceted, right? First of all, coming in as a superintendent into this district, one of the first things that I asked is, why don't we have a counselor at our
Mm.
middle school? Like our middle school
Oh,
needs
wow.
counselors, and I think
Oh,
that
yeah.
that's number one, right? And so we now have a counselor in our middle school. We have social workers and we have school psychologists, but a counselor is at a different level, right? We need that. Then my next step was, okay, wait a minute, now we need something else. And so how else do we help the children that are really struggling? And so now
Hmm.
we have behavior specialists on our campuses too. So it's really looking at mental health globally and what are some of those things that we need, right? Because it's just like we say, kids are not going to learn if they're not in their seats. Okay, so why are they not here? Sometimes it is medical, and I will tell you, and I'm so incredibly proud that we have the first ever we have telehealth
Hmm.
as part of our system. We have a multilingual doctor that sees families at every single one of our sites every day. It's through Zoom, but it's a partnership that I formed. And now we're branching our off into mental health. We
Mm.
want to be able to offer mental health. But I
Great.
would say, like, if I had to be able to create this dream and put and create something for children, I think it's time built into the day to just do what you and I are doing right now.
Love it. To be
We
amazing.
do, yeah,
Love that.
we do not have time, and it's because we're all under that same lens of we've got to do the teaching, which is absolutely needed.
Hmm.
But I don't think we do enough about really telling our story. And that's, I have several platforms and that's one. One is tell your story, the other one is lead with heart. Because
Mm.
if you can't lead with heart, if you don't lead with heart, you're not going to be compassionate. If you're not compassionate, you'll never, ever, ever get to empathy or equity because you have to have that to be able to feel what children are feeling or whomever it is that you're working with. And so but you also have to tell your story because people don't know. They think, that cliche, right? Oh, I thought you slept in the classroom, teacher. It's like people really see who you are now, but they don't know who you were.
Mm.
And you have to dress the part sometimes, right? You're dressed up, you're wearing your suits, and so because that's just what the dynamics of this job may be. But at the end of the day, I'm still Lori. I'm still who I was. Like I said earlier, if you put me in a room with a bunch of new people, I stress out because I'm not the person that typically likes to go up to people and say, "Hi, my name is," and just start chatting. Other times I can. Sometimes my daughter will say, "Mom, you get into an elevator and you just start talking to people." And I'm like, "I know." And so it's like I've learned to become that, but I think it goes back to that fear because if I know I'm going to go into a room full of colleagues, that's much more intimidating than an elevator with people I don't know who they are.
Mm.
Right? And so, but people need to hear that about you because they could be facing that. They may be facing that. And it does go away, or you can overcome it. You can learn strategies to overcome it. Self-talk. I remember back in the day where self-talk, you talk to yourself and people are thinking, she's crazy. And it's like, and that's not the case anymore. Like
Right.
you should be self-talking
So important.
all the time
Amen.
because sometimes you're the only person that really can talk to yourself and get that clarity you need. Um, So yeah, so I think that that's the one thing I know in our framework for the future and our learner profile, one of the tenets of our learner profile is that students will really become effective communicators and compassionate community members.
Mm.
And that only comes by learning through compassion, right? And it comes through learning to interact with others. And I think we just need to build more time within our systems for that, for vulnerability and conversation.
Love it. I
Yeah.
feel your heart, Dr. Gonzalez. I do, because you've shared the word compassion maybe a dozen times, and empathy and kindness, and just, yeah, I'm at a loss for words. I love it because you're the first superintendent, and I'm blessed to get to connect with a lot of superintendents. And the level of compassion you have, I think, is beautiful. You're the first one to say we need to make time. We need to make time in the day for kids to get to share, to connect, really to deepen the relationship, make it more of just, oh, they look like they're doing okay, but oh wow, after hearing their story, well, they had it kind of really rough. Maybe we could be a little more empathetic, maybe be a little kinder, maybe a little supportive versus, it just would change so much and improve their grades because now they feel
Oh,
safer, right?
absolutely.
They feel
Absolutely.
safe psychologically, emotionally, and physically. It's like game on. Let's do this. So I love that. And if you have any like whatever's on your heart, and I'm sure it's going to be beautiful. Whatever's on your heart, what would you like to share if someone is watching and needs some encouragement? Maybe it's an elementary student, maybe it's a middle school student, maybe it's a high school student, maybe it's a mom or a dad or a teacher or someone in admin. What would you like to say to her or him?
I think what I would like to say, and it, kind of might merge into a little bit of a story because again, I've been going through a lot of just self-discovery and really
Mm,
learning more about myself. And um, the reason I've been doing that is because you get to a point where you say, how can I get better? What can I do better? Because I want what's best for our children.
mm,
And it going back to your previous question of adding that time in my own discovery, I've learned that I realized I learned algebra by my dad, from my dad.
mm,
And my dad had only had a third grade education. He had no idea about algebra. But when I worked with him in the fields, he taught me how to create mathematical equations to come up with a solution so that we would not be cheated out of our money, right?
mm,
We would get paid. Well, through this self-discovery, I realized like, oh my goodness, Papi is the one who taught me how to do math, like, right? And that goes back to that having time for our children to talk, having our time for our children to have conversations. Because to your question, I think what I would love is for people to understand how much value they bring to their children's learning. We have them for 7 hours, but you have them for more.
mm,
Everyone, there's work that's been done where roads to literacy, where you realize what you do at home counts. And
mhm,
it doesn't matter where you're the richest person or you're the poorest person. You teach your children something every day, and that value is there. We need to tap into it by opening up those conversations to be able to connect. Because can you imagine if I was told at one point in math class, and I remember my math class, and I won't name the teacher, but I remember thinking, I do not know math. If he would have taken the time to say, hey, Lori, do you remember when you told me the story about when you worked with your dad in the field and you did da 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 da? Do you realize that's this? Do you like
right.
the
Yeah.
synapses that would have happened, right?
Yeah.
So I think that to me, that's what I would want to bring out, that irregardless of what we've done as a parent or as a caregiver, both caregivers and parents do not come with instructional manuals,
Mm,
but we have all done our best job and we only send our best children. And so what you've done, you need to hone in on and just say, I've done such a great job with my child that I've taught him or her this, that, and that. And now when they struggle at school, how can I connect it for them? What can I do, for that? I think too often we sort of don't think that we don't put enough value in what we've done, or we leave it all to the educators, and that's not okay either because we're a team. So I think that that's what I want to leave everybody with just the idea that regardless of who you are, what you've done, what you've not done, what you have and what you don't have. My parents only had a third grade education, but boy, did they value education and they try to teach me. My mom sang to me and said poems, read poems to me and made up stories to me every day. And that's why I'm the reader that I am, because I remember those days. So regardless of what you have and what you've done, it's contributed to who you are. And now it's your turn to amplify. And so
I
that's
love that. And thank you, Mr. and Mrs. Gonzalez, for raising your daughter and teaching her and just loving on her. I mean, wow, this was amazing. Thank you so much, Dr. Gonzalez, for making some time for us today.
and I'm gonna correct. I'm gonna give you my parents' last names are Cantu because Gonzalez is my married name, so it's
Oh, can
Mr.
too.
and Mrs. Cantu.
Mr. and
Yeah,
Mrs. Can too. Okay, sorry about that.
it's
Thank
okay.
you. And thank you
That's
again,
okay.
Lori. This is
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. This has been great. I appreciate you so much for, having this opportunity to just, I love your title, right? Born to Shine. I think we're all born to shine. Sometimes, we feel like it's a little dull, but the reality is that, just gotta take off those little scuff marks and move on and look like scuff marks are there for a reason. It's there to make us stronger and to, help us shine more. And we're all great people. So thank you, Mike. This has been fun.
Thank you so much.